Welcome to the Triple S podcast. There's a lot going on in every league in sports, college football, basketball, baseball, football right now, and I'm here to talk about all of it right now, especially the NFL as we get ready, geared up for the playoffs here. First, I just want to look at the standings here. I think right now the most interesting division in football is the NFC East, as they have two Super Bowl contenders, both Dallas and Philadelphia here, both at 10-4 at the time of this recording. Obviously it's going to be really heated down the stretch these last 2 weeks. I think it's interesting to see how it plays out. Philadelphia has been on a bit of a losing, not a bit, they've been on a losing streak right here, losing the last 3 games, including on Monday night to the Seahawks. And that was against the backup quarterback, Drew Lock, who, no disrespect to Drew Lock, but a team led by Drew Lock shouldn't really be challenging a team led by Jalen Hurts. It's interesting to see what's been going on here. Their last win came against that thriller against the Bills. They've shown they can beat good teams in the past, and it's not really fair to criticize the Eagles too much, simply because Jalen Hurts hasn't been healthy this whole time. I mean, we saw it in the Seahawks games. He ran a little bit, but on a team that's so reliant on a dual threat quarterback to take, his legs away, it really hampers them as we've seen these last couple of weeks. So I don't think that their losing streak is that big of a deal, because as soon as Jalen Hurts gets healthy, I think they'll be back to their winning ways. Looking at the Cowboys, they haven't had that losing streak, but they had a really ugly game Sunday afternoon against the Buffalo Bills. They lost 31-10, and it was just ugly. I mean, Prescott only had 134 yards, 1 interception, and it was really the running game for the Bills that was most concerning. I mean, you see James Cook, 179 yards on only 25 carries. I mean, you just can't allow that kind of stuff to happen if you think you're going to win a Super Bowl. And they were just, sort of destroyed this whole game, didn't really have a chance the whole game. They never led. And I think that, looking at this, they only had 195 total yards. Looking at this type of performance, I'm more concerned about the Cowboys than I am about the Eagles, even though the Eagles are on this losing streak, because at least the Eagles can point to Jalen Hurts being injured. I don't know what they can point to the Cowboys. Obviously, every team has ugly games, but this is really concerning for them. I don't doubt that they can get back at least 2 of these last 3 games that they play. But I think a really important one to look at is that Dolphins game next week. Now, we just talked about 2 teams. Dallas played the 2 teams from the AFC East. Miami leads that AFC East right now with 10 wins and 4 losses. They just beat the Jets 30-0. Last time they went out, I think that was a dominant win. Obviously, the Jets starting Zach Wilson, going through that sort of rotating door of quarterbacks. They didn't play the best competition there. But I think that having that win is super important for their morale as they go in. Again, they play the Cowboys next week, and then they play the league best Ravens, and then they play the Bills to finish the season out. So this is going to be a really tough end to the season. And just looking at this now, they could win all 3 of these games. They could lose all 3 of the games, or they can find a way to split. So much of this team is dependent on how Tua plays. Obviously, they have the best passing offense in the league, and they have the best offense in the league, point blank, scoring 31 points a game right now. And, this defense is going to have to carry them, because especially in that Bills game at the end of the season, I don't doubt that can become like a 35, 40-point game where it's just a shootout on both sides, Tua versus Josh Allen. And that's what we're going to get into more and more as we go into the playoffs. And these last 3 games, I think, for Miami are sort of a preview to the playoffs. They're all going to be playing playoff caliber teams. Even though I would look at Buffalo as a team on the outside looking in, and that's how ESPN, their playoff machine, has them right now. even though they've played really well, they're 8-6 right now. They've won their last 2 games. Obviously, we talked about how they dominated the Cowboys on Sunday. So I don't doubt that they can easily make their way into the playoffs, especially considering these next 2 teams that they play here, the Chargers and the Patriots. Both teams that are really struggling, both teams that may not have a head coach at the end of the season. It's crazy to say that about Belichick, but really the Patriots have been awful this season. And so they can obviously make some moves to get in there. But who are they going to take out of the playoffs? Are they going to take out a team like Indianapolis? Indianapolis has been playing really well this season. Are they going to take out a team like Cleveland? I think that Cleveland may be the best bet because even though they've been playing so well recently, they're still on a backup quarterback. We don't know how long Flacco is going to play. That game against the Bears are not a great team. They barely got that one out. I think if that receiver in the end zone hadn't dropped that Hail Mary on the ground, we'd be looking at a loss right now. Obviously, considering their situation, they've been playing really well with Deshaun Watson out. But I think that's the team that you have to look at for the Buffalo Bills to overtake and get a spot in that playoffs. Cleveland plays the Texans, the Jets, and the Bengals to finish out their season. Looking at the Jets, they haven't played very well, so I think that's a win. But the Texans are a sneaky challenger. The Texans right now are 8-6. They've been playing really well with their starting quarterback, their rookie quarterback, C.J. Stroud, who has obviously, been in a lot of better situation, but has played a lot better than the rest of these rookie quarterbacks. I thought that Carolina should have picked him 1-1 overall, not traded up just to get Bryce Young. And I think that's turning out, that prediction has turned out correct, as Carolina is the worst team in the NFL. They're going to have to give their pick to Chicago here, so they're not even getting any benefit from tanking here. They've just been truly awful this whole season. And looking more at that AFC South that has Houston, that has Indianapolis, that has Tennessee, has Jacksonville, none of these teams are... Tennessee hasn't played great this year with Will Levis at the helm, but the rest of these teams are playoff caliber teams. Are all at 8-6. Obviously, you don't want to see... I don't want to see... I'm a Jaguars fan. I don't want to see the Jags struggle like this. They've been on a 3-game losing streak as well, losing to the Bengals, the Browns, and the Ravens. The Bengals and the Browns didn't even have their starting quarterbacks. They got beat by Jake Browning there in the Bengals. And, obviously this most recent game I think is a little bit more excusable. They're playing a really good team in Baltimore Ravens. But still, this was a team that was basically a lock to win the division and make the playoff just 3 weeks ago. And now they are maybe struggling to win the division, and if they lose a couple more of these games here out, they could be... I don't think they're going to be out of the playoffs, but they very well could be. They play the Bucks, the Panthers, and the Titans. These are all winnable games for them, but they have no margin of error. They have to... they almost have to win out here, and they did this to themselves, obviously, losing these last 3 games. I still think that they're the best team in the division. If you just look at it, they beat the Colts twice. They beat the Texans once. They lost to the Texans earlier this season. But I think that they're the best shot for the AFC South to make it far in the playoffs. But they just have to, really figure out what the problem is there in Jacksonville, because recently they've looked really bad. And finally, one other team that I want to highlight here before we move on is a really surprising team right now. There would be the 3rd seed in the NFC. That is the Detroit Lions, who this season has been a really big surprise. They've really turned it around. Obviously, they were sort of a bottom dweller of the league for a really long time. in this year, starting with that win, the classic win, week 1 at Arrowhead against the Chiefs. They've been playing great so far, and that's really a lot of credit to their quarterback, Jared Goff. They're number 4 in pass yards right now. And I think that this is somebody who a lot of people, including myself, sort of counted out going into the season, and more when he was traded to Detroit for Matthew Stafford. And, he had some great seasons there in LA, but you could say that was a lot because of the team around him. I mean, we saw Matthew Stafford go in there in his first year, win a Super Bowl. But this year he's proved that he can do it, on his own, even with just a little bit of talent around him. Obviously, the rushing game, the running backs there, Jahmyr Gibbs, David Montgomery have been really important for them. They have 140 rushing yards a game, that's second in the league. And so I think that's maybe the biggest surprise for me this season is the Detroit Lions, and I'm really happy for them and their success this year, and I think that they can make it far in the playoffs. I mean, they have a team that can really, make it far in the playoffs. But, that's all to see. We got 3 more weeks in this regular season here, and then it's playoff time. I'm really excited for it, and we'll see in the next couple of weeks. Similar to the Detroit Lions in the NFL, I want to look now at the NBA and a really surprising team that has been really good this season. They finally put it together. They are leading the Western Conference. They have 20 wins so far. That is the Minnesota Timberwolves, led by Anthony Edwards, Rudy Gobert, Cat. And they finally put it together this season after struggling a lot. And, in their last game, they just won by 4 points to the Heat, who are another really good team. And really, I'm really surprised by their success so far. I think a lot of it can be attributed to Ant, who has really taken a step into superstardom. And even Rudy Gobert, who, was struggling when he first got traded to Minnesota. Right now he's performing like Rudy Gobert, a DPOY type of player. They always had the talent. They just had to figure it out, coaching-wise and just meshing-wise, and they've done it so far. I don't know if they can keep it up this whole season, but it remains to be seen. In the West, it's Minnesota, Oklahoma City, who's also finally put it together with a lot of the young stars, Shea, J-Dub, those type of guys. Then Denver, obviously, the reigning champions. Sacramento, who was really good last season. I thought that they were going to make it farther. They just got an unfavorable matchup in the playoffs with, Steph and Clay, who have been there, obviously, a ton of times, and they were able to advance. And one team near the bottom of the Western Conference, who may go on a hot streak here, I think that they're going to go on a hot streak, are the Memphis Grizzlies. Obviously in his first game back, John Morant led a comeback against the Pelicans. They were down about 20 points, and he seals the game with that game winner late. And this is obviously a team, missing John Morant for the first 25 games because of his off the court actions. And it was a team that I think had a good situation to miss Ja, as they had missed Ja last season. But then for some reason they traded Tyus Jones. They brought in Marcus Smart, who is a great point guard, but Tyus Jones was one of the best backup point guards in the league, and he had proven that he could run a team with John Morant out last season. And obviously Marcus Smart has been dealing with injuries right now. He's out for a couple remaining games. I don't know how long that injury is going to last, but they have been really awful without Ja on the court. And this is even with players like Jaren Jackson Jr. and Desmond Bane stepping up. I mean, Desmond Bane's averaging close to 25 points right now this season, but they just didn't have the cohesiveness and the talent to put him over the edge in a lot of these games. And I thought that if they just kept, close to maybe like a 400 win percentage, they would be doing all right. But right now they're really bad, and they're gonna have to dig themselves out of a hole here to make it back into the playoffs. I don't doubt that they can do it. They were the 2 seed in the West last year. I don't doubt that they can do it. But it's going to be really difficult right now, especially when you have a West, the teams I just named earlier, and then teams that are, outside the playoffs looking in right now, such as Golden State, such as Phoenix, Los Angeles, New Orleans. Los Angeles Lakers and Clippers are both right now in that 6 to 8 seed range. And the West is really stacked, as it has been for years. So I think if they want to make the playoffs, they have to start now. And they have to start winning now and really put their foot on the gas in order to catch up to a lot of these other teams by the end of this calendar year. Right now at the bottom of the West are the San Antonio Spurs. I want to talk about them for a little bit because the San Antonio Spurs, there's a lot of hype because they got Victor Wembanyama, who is supposed to be a generational prospect. I don't doubt that he still can be. He's averaging 19 points a game right now. I mean, that's crazy. Right now he's dealing with an injury. He's day-to-day right now. But I think that because of a lot of the hype that was going on around him, people forget that this is a team that had the number 1 overall pick, right? They were one of the worst teams in the league last year. And they just don't have the talent around him. I mean, I'm just going to name you some of the team around Victor Wembanyama. I mean, they're one of their best players, Devin Vassell, who is a rookie. I think he's not a rookie. He's a young player. I think he'll be doing all right. Jeremy Sohan. But those 3, Devin Vassell, Jeremy Sohan, and Victor Wembanyama are the best 3 players on that team. And that's just not a team built for success right there. They also have Keldon Johnson, and their young stars are rebuilding. I don't doubt that they can do something like what Oklahoma City is doing right now, that they struggled for a couple years, and now they're building organically a new cornerstone and franchise with a lot of these young players. But I think with a lot of the hype around Wembanyama, people forgot that takes a really long time. They are, they're not going to be good this season. They're going to have a top draft pick in the next draft. We'll see who they pick. And it's going to take, I'd say, maybe 3 to 4 more years to really get into a position where they can be competitive. And that's obviously going to be bad for Victor Wembanyama because he is such a generational type player that I'm worried that he's going to be sort of lost in this rebuild. And, and I don't think that he's going to be able to single-handedly sort of bring them out of the ashes. It's going to take a while, just like Oklahoma City did, just like Sacramento did. And not exactly in the same way, but Minnesota just did, as I talked about earlier. So I don't think this is not a quick fix, as obviously shown this season. They only have 4 wins. Right now they're last in the Western Conference. So it's going to take a couple years, but I trust in their process. And I trust that, in a couple years, they'll be all right. Now, looking at the Eastern Conference, obviously at the top, we're the 2 top teams that have been around for a while, Boston and Milwaukee, both with 20 wins so far. Both of these teams are just continuing what they did last season. The one team I want to look at, though, is the Miami Heat. They're at the 7 seed right now, which seems is like where they want to be because they've made the finals as an 8 seed last season. Jimmy Butler obviously performs way differently in the playoffs, and that's such a while away. But we'll have to see what goes on here. Jimmy Butler's out right now with an injury, so that may contribute, to the latest loss. They lost to Timberwolves in Minnesota. But I think that looking at them right now, their biggest issue is not a really non-issue, so I don't think that it's a big deal for them. It's that Jimmy Butler is only scoring about 20 points a game. But we've seen him do this in years past. And we've seen him turn it up later in the season when they really need to win. And, I think that that's a lot of the case with a lot of teams in the NBA where whether it's either load management or just not playing with the same intensity. There are these star players that put up underwhelming numbers in the regular season, and then when it comes to the late regular season and the playoffs, they really turn it up. So for teams like Miami, for teams like LA, for teams like Brooklyn and Cleveland, I think that it's not a really non-issue for them because I think that their stars will show out. I just want to bring one more team to your attention here in the Eastern Conference. It's right now the 4 seeds. I mean, obviously, fourth in the East with 16 wins, the Orlando Magic. They're on a little bit of a 2-game losing streak. They lost back-to-back games at the Celtics. But I don't think that's a problem. That's, they're the 1 seed there. And this is a team that, again, struggled for a really long time, as we've seen with other teams here rising up. And right now they're sort of reaping the rewards of that. Led by Paolo Banchero and both of the Wagner brothers. This is a team that, again, was built organically. And I think teams like this, teams like OKC, show the importance of drafting right and really honing in on the draft because that's so important. This is not a team that traded for a splashy free agent, nor this is a team that traded for a lot of their players. This is a team that built their team like Paolo, like Jalen Suggs, who has been playing a lot better this season, like Franz Wagner, organically. And right now, their biggest story is their defense. They're only allowing 109 points a game, which is 4th best in the league. And that's important for a team that, doesn't really have a star right now. Not a team that has somebody who can put up 30, 40 points a night. Obviously, Paolo Banchero is their leading scorer. He's scoring 21 points a game right now. And I think that, this team basketball, led by their defense, is really important for them. And it's something that is really important once you get later in the season after the All-Star break. And I think that this is a team that can make a lot of noise in the playoffs, as a sort of a surprise team. Because think about it, if they're playing a team like Cleveland, like the Knicks, even like Philadelphia, when you look at teams like that who aren't really, built on that type of team basketball with the defense, with the assist numbers, I think in a series that can really help a team like the Orlando Magic. Finally, today I want to talk a little bit about college football. Today is signing day, so there's a lot of flips going on, and this is going to become more and more prevalent with the nature of NIL. I mean, we just saw UGA lose Dylan Raiola, the second best player in this class, to Nebraska, a team that, historically has not recruited very well. And, just today they flipped KJ Bolden from Florida State, who's the number 16 overall prospect. And there's a lot of these flips going on. And then the nature of the transfer portal, I mean, teams can rebuild and reload so quickly nowadays, and that's shown in the teams in the playoffs this year. I mean, you look at a team like Texas, who had struggled for a number of years, and finally they get the right coach, Steve Sarkisian, and they get the right players in there, both by recruiting in the transfer portal. And, right now they're number 3. They're making it into the playoffs. And I want to preview both of these playoff games here. Obviously, first is the Rose Bowl, which is the number 1 overall team, Michigan, versus the number 4 overall team, the Alabama Crimson Tide. They just snuck in. Obviously, there's a big deal and a controversy around the college football playoff of whether Florida State should have gotten in, or because of the injury that happened to Jordan Travis earlier in the year, does that make them not one of the 4 best teams? I personally think, as much as I don't like FSU, they did deserve to be in, even if they would have lost in this Rose Bowl game against Michigan. But that's already in the past. Now we're looking forward to the future, where it's going to be a really good matchup. Obviously both these starting quarterbacks, Jalen Milroe, J.J. McCarthy, have had great years. Jalen Milroe started off shaky. Remember he got benched in that game versus USF that Alabama had to pull out there late. And J.J. McCarthy, the last couple of years, though, that's a different story. I mean, he's been He's been great this whole year. You look at the touchdown interception ratio, 19 touchdowns to 4 interceptions this year. And I think that that's going to be really the difference here on whether how well he can manage this game. Because when it comes to these big moments like this, it's not so much about the talent, because all of these teams are around the close to the same in talent-wise. It's about who can manage the game better in that moment. And, obviously, if AJ McCarthy can just rely on the rest of his team, like Blake Corum, over 1,000 yards this season, 24 touchdowns as that main back for them. I think if he can just manage this game well, they should come out here with a win. It's going to be a very close game, but I think it's going to come down to who makes the most mistakes. And in that regard, I trust J.J. McCarthy more because of the experience that he has. He's only thrown 4 interceptions this season because of that type of completion percentage that he has, and because of just his play this season. I trust J.J. McCarthy more. We saw it in the Ohio State game. He played lights out there, and they got the win. No offense to Jalen Milroe, but I think that he doesn't have that type of football maturity just yet in the sense of managing that game correctly. Obviously, it remains to be seen. I think it's going to be a really close game. But just in this moment, I'd take Michigan for that fact. I think when we get down to these games, talent doesn't really matter that much because all of these teams are so close talent-wise. The other playoff game, which is going to be number 2 versus number 3, Texas, the number 3 team, versus Washington, the number 2 team, down there in New Orleans in the Sugar Bowl. Washington has had a pretty difficult schedule so far. Especially considering the type of teams that the Pac-12 usually plays. The Pac-12 has been loaded this year. They beat Oregon twice, including most recently in the Pac-12 Conference Championship game. And what I think is most important looking at that game is how well Michael Penix Jr. played in that game and how well he put the team on his back, how much he put the team on his back. Because this is a team that is built on their offense. He has over 4,000 yards this season. That's just crazy. And it's a team that had really been counted out in a lot of these games. It is a team that, almost lost to Oregon State, almost lost to Utah, almost lost to Washington State. But they've maintained their composure this whole time. And I think that really contributed to that game against Oregon. Meanwhile, on the other side, obviously Texas has had a great season. They only lost in the Red River Shootout in a really close game. And they dominated Oklahoma State in their conference championship game. And so I think that the biggest test is going to be that Texas defense and how well they can sort of control Michael Penix Jr. and his mobility, his arm talent, his arm strength. And if those DBs can really control him that way and maybe get a couple picks, especially early in the game, I think that Texas has the talent there to control the game from early on. Obviously, Washington can do the same thing. But I think this game, the key is going to be who can control the game in the first quarter, the first half. And for that reason, I have Texas. Because I think that their defense, if they can just force a couple mistakes from Washington, they can really control this game. Because Washington, they're banking mostly on their offense and a lot on their passing game. While their defense is still good, obviously it's a playoff team. I think that it's not comparable to the type of defense that Texas has. And both of these offenses on both teams are really lethal. But I'll give Texas just a slight edge here. I think all of these games are going to be great games to watch. They're going to be really close games. But right now, the national championship matchup that I have is Michigan versus Texas there in Houston. But we'll see in these next couple of weeks, as we'll see with what I talked about in the NFL and the NBA. But that's all for now. Thank you.